tonight. I slept through the natural light, but I'll do it if it feels alright. Alright, alright.
Hello and welcome to Central Coast Poetry Shows, and I'm your host, Jim Russo. Well, my reason for producing this show is this. For about 10 years, I've been reading and attending poetry readings all over California's Central Coast. And during that time, I've had the privilege of hearing and seeing some very talented poets read their own words. This show is to be a platform for those poets to be seen and heard by you. Tonight, our first guest is Jeffrey Leonard. Jeffrey Leonard is a 12th generation American, 3rd generation Californian, a retired elementary school teacher by profession, and a lover of too many subjects to mention, but especially poetry. In fact, according to Jeffrey, poetry saved his life and is the subject of the first poem he ever wrote to be read to and by others. Arriving as a writer of poetry late in life, Jeffrey has focused his poetic themes on nature, history, culture, memoir, and as an Army veteran, issues involving American military personnel after they have come home from war, removed their uniforms, and tried to reconnect to civilian life. He is a co-facilitator of Veterans Right, affiliated with Poetry Center San Jose, meeting monthly at San Jose State University in the Martin Luther King Library, serving any veteran who cares to meet and write with the group. These monthly meetings, plus networking with Maxine Hong Kingston's Berkeley group of veterans who write and meet 4 times a year, have become his heart compass at the present. Poetry he has discovered allows him to live, as Jane Hirschfield described, a 360-degree life, a way to accept the most difficult things of this human existence. And now I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Jeffrey Leonard. Welcome for Jeffrey. Coming, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. So, Jeffrey, getting a little ahead of myself here, you wanted to talk about muses. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about muses. I think we capped your appreciation with Neil's past show that we had.
I was so amused by Neil's muses. And I found that I shared some of those. Mm-hmm. For me, as I indicated to you, the Buddhist monk, as opposed to the Taoist monk, although sometimes the Taoist monk too speaks to me, but primarily the Buddhist monk. In fact, everythth that I write is definitely inspired by that. Well, the Taoist muse would be something like what David Budbill provides. This wonderful poet that comes out of New England, and who wrote poems that dealt with clouds appearing and then disappearing. That's like all of us. Mm-hmm. The Buddhist muses for me would be something like what Jane Hirschfield experiences. She describes her writing practice as having a number of wheels, one of which is, of course, meditation. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the Buddhist muse is myself and my 40-year practice of meditating, and how my meditation practice helps me deal with all the difficulties mm-hmm. that happen and have happened throughout my life.
You know what I'd like to ask you to talk more about is the Veterans Right, which is that you guys are involved in, and the fact that that you have these readings on campus that are open to all veterans. I think if we could reiterate that and maybe let them all know that it's available, if you want to make a few comments about that.
Well, I can a little shout out to my friend Amy Meyer, who is the founder of our group. Brought Nick Butterfield, who is one of the co-facilitators, and along with myself, we started out at the Markham House over 2.5 years ago. And this group has grown. We've brought people like Amelia Gallejos, who you've had on a previous program, and Doug Nelson, who you've had on a previous program. It's a very tight and well-bonded group of men, and we have In addition to that, we've invited women soldiers. We have yet to really connect with that group. There's over 500 veterans at San Jose State.
Wow.
And we are making every effort to
Include
bring them aboard.
Yeah.
We have a wonderful room on the 3rd floor there, and we meet every first Friday at the MLK Library in San Jose.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, I'd like to ask you what I ask all my guests. Of all the poems you've written, do you have a favorite?
Well, it's called Poetry Saved My Life.
Oh, okay.
And I mentioned to you that I started late. I was 65 years old. I was doing journal writing at the time, inspired by Stephen Levine. It was what we call a life review, and I was reviewing through this journal just where my life was going, and it definitely had a very important spiritual component. And as my poem indicates, I was up in my attic, my garage attic, and my knee went through the sheetrock, and I plunged quickly down below.
Oh, well, let's not give away too much.
Yeah, I won't, because this is not in the poem.
Oh, okay.
And I will share with you this part of the narrative as I go down on the sheetrock, 8 feet below, to a cement floor.
My gosh.
Which could have left me dead or quadriplegic or any number of other things, especially maybe a brain injury, for example.
Right.
And so that's what my poem's about.
Well, I'm glad you made it.
And I was thinking about what I need to write about. It was more than just a journal experience, and that's what the poetry and my poem tells you in full, I think, dimension what that's about.
Well, I'd like you to step to the podium now, Jeffrey, and read that poem first, and then give us more. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeffrey Leonard.
Poetry saved my life. The day I fell through the ceiling of my garage attic, I landed below, on boxes filled with words written by poets. Only minor contusions to my back and ribs, but observations, admonitions, profound questions from the poets punctured my heart on that fateful day. From a supine position, I could see a circle of friends I had read. Wendell Berry picked me up gently and whispered, "It is though I descend slowly earthward out of the air, I rest in peace in you." Lipo emerged, handed me a goblet of plum wine, and spoke this verse: "Hard is the journey, so many turnings, and now where am I?" Robert Bly rushed to check my pulse and handed me a headdress of antlers. He inquired if I had been riding on a dragon when I fell. Lawrence Ferlinghetti smoothly elbowed his way past Bly to take my temperature. He told me he had read somewhere the meaning of existence, yet had forgotten just exactly where. Bert Glick muttered just loud enough to hear, "He has a cookie aura about him." Billy Collins displayed an x-ray of my anxious heart. I could make out Snyder, Whitman, Rexroth, and Yeats, all curious as to my well-being. Then the men made way for a bevy of female poets: Maya Angelou, Nikki Giovanni, Emily Dickinson, Adrienne Rich, surrounded my body with compassion and with words of precision. They checked my blood pressure. Finally, Mary Oliver stepped forward to hold my hand, examining me with an air of attention and presence. She questioned me. "Now that you've survived a plunge from above, what will you do with this one precious life?" Now, I mentioned that I did work with veterans, and being a Army veteran myself, I wrote this in 2014, literally on Veterans Day. It's the first thing that I had ever written regarding being a veteran. And it's not so much about me at all, but remembering Tom Berggren is its title. It's Veterans Day, 2014. I'm making my way slowly down Newport Avenue. My shoes crunch softly on sidewalks, suffused with fallen leaves of sycamore. My unhurried walk is purposeful. I walk to remember Thomas Howard Berggren, high school friend, college roommate, now long departed. Tom's identity is etched into the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Honored Panel 58E, row 19. He still comes to me to visit me in dreams, my old college roommate. 6 feet 5 inches tall, trim, slight facial hair, beaming a broad Scandinavian smile, wearing those high above the ankle moccasins he got in Mazatlan in '65. Tom, shot down in a helicopter, May 11th, 1968. Casualty Province, Long On. Forever 22. And now remembered, this young man from San Lorenzo on a chunk of ebony granite just east of the Shark Tank, as a son of San Jose, one of 142. In Archibald MacLeish's poem, The Young Dead Soldiers, they say, we leave you our deaths. MacLeish instructs, give them their meaning. Tom, it's been 46 years since that damn war claimed you. I have vowed to use this one precious life to give meaning to yours. My shoes crunch softly on sidewalks, suffused with fallen sycamore leaves. Life and death is all around us. So one of my muses is the historian. I did not get a degree in English, I got a degree in history. And another one of my muses seems to be all the ancestors that seem always present in my life. This is called Bear River to Fort Bridger, and it deals with a trip I took. I retrace the ride from Bear River Station to Fort Bridger in Wyoming that my great-great-grandfather, George Bradford Leonard, did. In March of 1860, George Bradford Leonard answered that famous advertisement, wanted, young, skinny, wiry fellows, not over 18, must be expert riders, willing to risk death daily, orphans preferred. My great-great-grandfather took the oath of the Pony Express rider, agreeing not to use profane language, not to get drunk, not to gamble, not to treat animals cruelly, and to conduct himself honestly and be faithful to his duties. For 18 months, George Bradford flew on the back of the fastest horses, delivering communications at $5 per ounce. In sunlight or snowstorm, by moonlight or starlight, or, as I vividly imagine, on nights so painfully dark that blackness encouraged sleep or terror. I think of him, turning 18 in his second month of service, performing the same duties as Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody, blazing his way on a choice mount. From Bear Creek River Station to Quaking Aspen to Muddy Creek and finally to Fort Bridger. Apples don't fall far from the tree. DNA tells a mysterious narrative. One truth is upheld. Leonard men are always guards on their basketball teams. No big men in the family. Mark Twain said it best, a little bit of a man, brimful of spirit and endurance, when describing a Pony Express rider for the newspaper. George Bradford Leonard carried President Lincoln's inaugural address for the folks in California to read. I wonder, was he conscious of this history-making ride as he thundered through his area, or was he simply concerned with the health and endurance of his trusted horse? I think of you, great-great-grandfather, in your later years. Did you pause and give thought to your youthful days as a rider, when the feel of the air against your body and face required a state of complete awareness as you danced across a Wyoming landscape? George Bradford Leonard, my ancestor, did you ever retrace your tracks, or as your descendants have? Or did you revisit your earthy trail only in dreams? The forms and colors of your Pony Express route must have been embedded in your mind. Now, how wondrous it all seems. George Bradford, interesting how history has remembered you and these 182 men who Bret Harte declared were no less than the bold knights of the Pony Express.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeffrey Leonard, thank you. My next guest is Dale Barnett. Dale grew up in a sleepy little town known as San Jose, California. He spent time in the Air Force, mostly stationed in North Dakota, where he learned the beauty of the Northern Lights and the dislike of living in the snow. After returning to California, he spent time as a plumber, a mechanic, and now his true calling as a poet. In 2008, after losing 3 parents in 6 months, he started writing poetry as a way of recovering from his grief. He discovered the world of poetry and has been writing and reading at groups such as Veterans Center, Veterans Right, and has performed at the 2016 and 2017 Poetry Festival in San Jose and the Parsons Lodge in Yosemite. Dale finds inspiration everywhere he goes and has written hundreds of poems, designed and printed 3 self-published books, Poetic Winds of Asilomar, Bugle Call, and Tuolumne Poetry. He is most inspired by walks on the beach with family and friends. For the last 33 years, he has lived in Morgan Hill with his wife Jean and 2 daughters, Rose and Jamie. And now I'd like to introduce you to Dale Barnett. Welcome, Dale.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
So we wanted to talk about how and why I write, which I'm interested in knowing that about everybody.
Yes, it was a frightening experience in 2009. I was prompted to write one prompt, actually. It was, I'm not sure what else to call it. I was ordered by God to write a prompt, and that prompted all the rest of my writing. And then I started questioning and searching for answers after that. And at first I thought maybe I was suffering since my skill level was so low, and I never cared about writing or certainly poetry before that at all. I thought maybe I was suffering from a brain tumor, and quite frankly, and I wrote about that.
It's called writer's block.
Yes. And I couldn't stop writing. And for 6 months I kept writing and writing. I even had a dent in my finger from the pen.
My gosh.
And I wrote every day, 10 to 30 poems a day.
My goodness.
And I'd read to my mechanics, my techs, and customers, and sometimes I'd find an answer why I was writing that day, and sometimes I wouldn't. And I found over the years that there was many reasons, not just one. I thought there might be one reason, but there were so many reasons I was writing, and too many to answer at the moment. And where they come from is quite often just where I'm at the time. Right. From Asilomar locally to group. Quite often there's a word or something that's spoken, or a person, and they just fly in like a butterfly, and the words come by.
Yeah, it's interesting. Going to attending poetry readings, it's often something that feeds me is other people's words. Suddenly you'll hear them reading, one word will jump out at you, and it'll just trigger a whole string of thoughts.
Yes.
And next thing you know, you got your pen out and you're writing it all down. Yeah. So it's poetry's an amazing thing. It's hard to catch, and yet you never know when it's going to show its face.
Yes, that first 6 months of writing, I had a stack of notebooks like this.
Yeah.
And then I went through a miserable experience. Putting into a computer.
Oh, deciding,
putting up which ones, marking them A, B, and C, and putting them into a computer, and having my family help edit them.
Outstanding.
And for 3 months, I hardly did any writing. It was a terrible, torturous experience.
It is torturous, isn't it? Yeah. Well, Dale, I asked this question of all my guests. Of all the poems you've written, do you have a favorite?
And the answer is the same. The one I'm writing in the 5 minutes I'm
moment.
writing.
Yeah.
But I have one I would like to start off with, and that's Reflection.
Reflection's good. Well, I'd like you to step to the podium and read that poem first, and then give us much more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale. Ladies and gentlemen, Dale Barnett.
This one is from my book from Asilomar that I wrote there. Reflection. Where did this man come from? East, west, a land no longer known? Where has his feet trod? His voice is strange, a stranger surely to this land. I look at him. I see past his skin and bones. His thoughts are eerie, clearly strange. He seems to know my thoughts, the ones I don't share. He even writes them out for all to hear. How dare he? I get a glance in the mirror, a reflection of me? Nah, not me. Yes, it's me. Who stands next to me, whispering in my ear? Out of the one I wrote in the 3 days I was at UC, is a little bit of a funny one. Chipmunk Town. Oh, the hawk is back in town. He just ate Uncle Joe. Poor old Joe, a bit slow, old and slow it was. His time to go. Up high he saw him fly, where Mr. Hawk rests satisfied. Home we go to mourn the loss of dear old slow Uncle Joe. This one is out of my chapbook of Bugle Call, Battles in the Duffel. The unspoken death of a vet at home. It's at his doorstep. Home he sees, duffel over his shoulder. Questions linger on same. He knows in details what's bagged up in green canvas. Carefully in private, he unloads letters from home. All that was needed now on his home bed. Softly touching letters of comfort. Treasures in a soldier's life. Back to the first book. Mere words. My life was a kaleidoscope of wonders, beyond my limited scope. Love chased, but not caught, till it caught me. A lovely lady with sweet girls in tow drove me down to a love that a kaleidoscope view had not prepared me for. Oh yes, the great northern lights leave you stunned, with nothing left worth saying. But this love was beyond earthly wonders, strumming my soul alive. One day I'll pass, having seen the great earthly light of love, satisfied beyond mere words. Rock am I, white rock, I've traveled far. Dead or alive I speak, I've traveled far, resting on top. Weathered and dropped, but alive, I am and was. Once deep in thought, mountain in the core. Exposed I am on a mountaintop, I am the top rock. They all look to me, my veins icy cold. Rock of ages am I, my name. Testify. Timeless warriors pass on the saber. Ale or wine is passed around the fire. Dawning mind, weapons are sharpened for war. Spirits high, but drunk down. Dawn will come, eye to eye, hand to hand. No shake of peace, too late to come. Blood will buy it, of some sort. At sunrise, they must die. Not to go home in shame. Dawn too short, covered with dust and smoke. Wild birds stop singing. Young men screech as if mad this day. Birds come back, grass and flowers, in strange shapes will only testify. Song's notes testify in time that tears have watered these fields. My paper is dry, lead ready, target undefined, pondering the very meaning. The wad and lead lingering, a storm is a brewing. Will rust and pondering ruin the powder of powdered lead? I define the word I cannot pronounce. It's the point, the issuance of this journey. I find I aim at nothing. My hand shakes, but does not matter. Smiley, no reason or rhyme. I can't stop or start my shaking trail of lead. Should I take a wider stance, a pellet or two may hit, scattered about the expanse of white. Will a word or a letter call upon my blank page, revealing a fool or a poet to starve? How cruel I find this corner. No view, no hint, not a dot. You find me here, blasting away on auto, hot air and smoke. Mirror and me alone. What the heck is Smealy anyway? This one actually was written by my wife at Yosemite, her first poem she wrote. To be the cat. I live in a city, many yards to see. My family lives in a house. I let them share my bed. They feed me, pet me, and anger me. They brought me home a black dog to chase me. I stay outside mostly. The sun warms my tree porch. The pesky birds come through to steal figs from my jungle gym play zone. Oh, what's that sound? A baby's cry. Where is it coming from? From my room? The people stay there. Where the people stay there. Is that sound? Again? I see it. A black and orange monster here to steal my people. They let it loose to chase me. Oh, here it comes. After me. It's a kitten.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Dale Barnett. Thank you, Dale. I want to thank you for finding us. This has been Central Coast Poetry Shows. I'm your host, Jim Russo. Find us again. Thank you and good night.
I'm beating up the street tonight.